A successful black woman's authority was challenged in the most public and humiliating way possible at her own establishment. The blatant disrespect unleashed a swift and decisive response that left an entire staff jobless within minutes of their egregious mistake. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The marble lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel gleamed under the midday sun, its polished surfaces reflecting the quiet power of old money and sharp suits. Conversations hushed as Zara Washington stepped through the revolving doors, her confident stride and tailored navy suit marking her as someone with purpose. The click of her heels against the cold floor echoed through the space as she surveyed what would soon be hers, the crown jewel of Nashville's hospitality scene. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the ambient murmur of the lobby. "Carol Coleman." The hotel manager approached with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you with something?" Her tone suggested the opposite of assistance. Zara smiled professionally. "I'm here for the executive meeting in the Magnolia Suite." Carol's eyes narrowed as she looked Zara up and down. "I don't believe you're on our guest list today. Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need one," Zara replied calmly, reaching for her bag. Before she could retrieve her credentials, Carol raised her hand dismissively. "This is a private establishment. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The lobby fell silent. Several guests paused mid-conversation, watching the scene unfold. A businessman lowered his newspaper. Two women at the concierge desk exchanged glances. "There must be some misunderstanding," Zara said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. With barely concealed irritation, Carol pressed a small button on her lapel. "Security to the main lobby, please. We have an unauthorized visitor." Within moments, Anthony Rodriguez and Michael Johnson appeared, their security uniforms freshly pressed. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Anthony stated flatly. Phones emerged from pockets and purses. A teenage girl began streaming. A business executive pretended to take a call while recording the entire interaction. "This is unnecessary," Zara said, maintaining her composure even as her cheeks burned. "If you would just allow me to—" "Please don't make this difficult," Michael interrupted, gesturing toward the exit. With dignity intact but pride wounded, Zara allowed herself to be escorted across the gleaming marble floor. Every step was captured by the growing number of devices pointed in her direction. By the time she reached the revolving doors, the first clips were already being uploaded, shared, and commented upon. Her humiliation was becoming viral before she'd even left the property. What none of them knew, not Carol with her smug satisfaction, not the security guards with their rehearsed professionalism, not the voyeuristic guests with their recording devices, was exactly who they had just thrown out of the Grand Meridian Hotel. Outside the Grand Meridian Hotel, Zara Washington stood perfectly still, her mind racing through calculations and consequences. Despite the humiliation burning in her chest, her face betrayed nothing. No anger, no hurt, just the practiced calm of someone who had anticipated this moment. Around her, a small crowd had gathered, smartphones raised to capture whatever might happen next. Two police cars pulled into the circular driveway, their lights flashing against the hotel's gleaming facade. Someone, likely Carol, had called about a disturbance. Zara took a deep breath, watching as two officers approached with hands resting cautiously on their belts. "Ma'am, we received a call about an incident," the first officer said, his tone professional but wary. "The hotel management has requested you leave the premises." Zara nodded slightly. "I understand, officer, but there seems to be a misunderstanding." Her voice remained steady as she reached into her designer handbag. The officers tensed, but relaxed when she withdrew only a leather portfolio. "My name is Zara Washington," she said, opening the portfolio to reveal an executive badge with the Grand Meridian logo prominently displayed. "As of 9 this morning, I am the CEO of the Grand Meridian hotel chain. These are the acquisition documents signed by the board yesterday." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the traffic noise seemed to fade as the officers examined her credentials, confusion evident on their faces. "You're the owner?" the second officer asked, glancing between Zara and the hotel entrance where Carol Coleman now stood, watching the scene unfold. "I am," Zara confirmed, her gaze fixed on Carol. "And I'd like to return to my property now." The crowd that had gathered began to murmur. Someone whispered, "She's the boss." Another voice, "They threw out their own CEO." As the officers escorted Zara back toward the entrance, Carol Coleman's face drained of all color. The manager's hand flew to her throat as realization dawned. She had just publicly humiliated her new employer. "Ms. Coleman," Zara said as she approached, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I believe we have some matters to discuss." A young woman in the crowd whispered to her companion, "Did you get that on video?" "Every second," came the reply. Behind her professional mask, Zara felt a flicker of satisfaction. She hadn't planned this public unveiling. But perhaps it was exactly what the Grand Meridian needed, a moment of truth that would expose what had been hiding beneath its polished surface all along. Within minutes, Zara Washington marched back into the lobby, this time flanked by 2 officers and a visibly stunned Margaret Carter. The board member's usually composed demeanor had cracked, her eyes wide as she struggled to process the situation unfolding before her. The marble floor that had witnessed Zara's humiliation just moments ago now carried the echo of her confident footsteps as she returned with authority. The staff froze in place. The receptionist, who had smirked earlier, now stared at her computer screen, avoiding eye contact. Security personnel shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the gravity of what was happening. Zara positioned herself at the center of the lobby, her calm exterior masking the storm of emotions within. "May I have everyone's attention?" she announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The chatter ceased immediately. Guests paused mid-conversation, sensing something momentous was occurring. "I am Zara Washington, the new Chief Executive Officer of the Grand Meridian hotel chain. The acquisition was finalized last week." Margaret Carter stood beside her, nodding stiffly in confirmation. The board member's fingers nervously adjusted her pearl necklace as she watched her colleagues' reactions. "Effective immediately," Zara continued, her voice unwavering. "Carol Coleman and Thomas Morrison are terminated from their positions." The words hung in the air like thunder before a downpour. Their actions today represent everything this establishment will no longer tolerate. The atmosphere shifted instantly. A young bellhop in the corner couldn't suppress a smile. The front desk supervisor exhaled audibly, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. Others, particularly those in management positions who'd been close to Carol, exchanged panicked glances. "I'll be meeting with department heads within the hour," Zara stated, addressing the stunned audience. "Until then, please continue serving our guests with the dignity and respect everyone deserves when they walk through these doors." As she moved toward the elevators with Margaret, smartphones throughout the lobby captured every moment. By evening, the video had spread across social media platforms, accumulating millions of views. News outlets picked up the story with headlines blaring, "Black CEO fired her racist staff in 2 minutes, industry shaken." In the executive suite, Zara finally allowed herself a moment alone. She placed her hands on the desk that was now hers, steadying herself. The CEO hadn't planned for her first day to become a national talking point, but perhaps this was exactly the catalyst the Grand Meridian needed. Outside her door, she could hear Margaret Carter on the phone, urgently arranging an emergency board meeting. The revolution had begun, and there would be no going back. The morning after the viral incident, Zara Washington stood at the head of the polished mahogany table in the Grand Meridian's top-floor suite. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the tense faces of the board members. Her posture was impeccable, betraying none of the exhaustion from the previous day's confrontation. "Yesterday was a watershed moment," she began, her voice steady. "Not just for this hotel, but for the entire hospitality industry. What happened in our lobby has been viewed over 2 million times since last night." Leonard Price shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair, exchanging glances with Evelyn Turner. The boardroom remained silent as Zara outlined her vision for the Grand Meridian, a complete cultural transformation. "Our establishment will become a beacon of true hospitality," she continued, distributing folders containing her detailed plan. "Every guest who walks through our doors will be welcomed with dignity, regardless of their appearance, background, or the assumptions our staff might make about them." Margaret Carter, who had been quietly reviewing the documents, looked up with concern etched across her face. The board member tapped her manicured nails against the table. "These are admirable goals, Zara," she said, her calculation evident in every measured word. "But we must consider the financial implications. The Grand Meridian has a certain clientele. Will these reforms scare off our regular guests?" The question hung in the air. Several board members leaned forward, clearly sharing Margaret's concerns. The CEO took a moment, surveying the room before responding. "If our culture scares them off," Zara replied simply, "we never deserved their loyalty." She walked to the window, gesturing toward the Nashville skyline. "Look at this city. It's evolving, growing more diverse every year. Our establishment can either evolve with it or become irrelevant." She turned back to face them, her resolve unmistakable. "The numbers support this. Hotels embracing inclusive practices have seen revenue increases of 15% over 5 years. This isn't just morally right, it's good business." Evelyn Turner cleared her throat. "And the staff who remain? How do you propose to transform an entire culture overnight?" "Not overnight," Zara corrected, "but starting today. I've already scheduled comprehensive training programs. Those willing to grow with us will have every opportunity. Those who aren't—" She let the implication hang. As the meeting concluded, the divisions in the room were clear. Some board members nodded in agreement, while others whispered among themselves. Margaret Carter lingered behind as others filed out. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said quietly. Zara Washington smiled. "For the first time in the Grand Meridian's history, I believe we do." 3 days after the viral incident, Zara Washington stood at the podium in the Grand Meridian's largest conference room. The tension was palpable as she unveiled her Hospitality First protocol, a comprehensive overhaul of the hotel's service culture. Staff members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging nervous glances as she announced mandatory sensitivity training for everyone, from housekeeping to executive management. "This isn't punishment," Zara explained, her voice firm but measured. "It's an opportunity for growth. The Grand Meridian will lead by example." She paused, scanning the room before addressing the elephant no one wanted to acknowledge. "Anthony Rodriguez and Michael Johnson will remain on staff." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The 2 security guards who had escorted her out just days before sat rigid in the back row, their faces masks of controlled emotion. "Second chances matter," she continued. "How we respond to mistakes defines us more than the mistakes themselves." After the meeting, Anthony Rodriguez approached his new boss with visible reluctance. "Mrs. Washington," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I appreciate the opportunity, but why keep us? We were just following orders, but still." "That's precisely why," she replied. "Systems fail when people just follow orders without questioning them. I need people who understand that firsthand." Rodriguez nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. He would attend the training, but the doubt in his eyes spoke volumes about his internal struggle. Michael Johnson, however, surprised everyone. While his discomfort was evident in his tense shoulders and averted gaze, he approached Zara Washington as staff filtered out of the room. "I'd like to volunteer for the first training session," he announced. Loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear, Margaret Carter, who had been observing from the sidelines, raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Are you sure?" Zara asked. Johnson straightened his posture. "Yes, ma'am. I have a 16-year-old daughter who saw that video. I need to show her that one bad moment doesn't define a person's character." Zara's expression softened momentarily. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Then, as they dispersed, whispers circulated among the staff. Some admired Johnson's courage, while others questioned his motives. But beneath the surface conversations, a current of resistance was forming. In the employee break room, Leonard Price had already begun planting seeds of discontent, suggesting to anyone who would listen that the new CEO was more interested in making a statement than preserving the hotel's prestigious reputation. The battle lines were being drawn, but Zara Washington had anticipated this. Change never came without resistance, and she was prepared for the long game ahead. The dimly lit executive lounge on the top floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel hummed with hushed voices well past midnight. Leonard Price, his silver hair catching the low light, hunched over his laptop while Evelyn Turner paced behind him, her designer heels sinking into the plush carpet. "Send that to Carol's personal email, not her work account," Evelyn whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "She may be gone, but she still has connections in housekeeping." Leonard nodded, his fingers tapping furiously. "I've already got 15 staff members ready to sign the petition. If we can prove this diversity crusade is hurting morale, the board might reconsider their support." The emails bounced between former managers and current employees, each message more desperate than the last. One department head wrote, "This isn't about inclusion, it's about revenge. She's dismantling everything we built." Across town, in a community center with walls adorned with civil rights heroes, Zara Washington sat surrounded by Nashville's most respected activists. The CEO's calm demeanor belied the storm she'd weathered over the past week. "What happened to you wasn't isolated," said Reverend James Mitchell, sliding a folder across the table. "We've documented 27 similar incidents at luxury hotels across the South in the last year alone." Zara opened the folder, scanning testimonials from black professionals who'd been questioned, followed, or removed from establishments where they were paying guests. "This is exactly why I can't back down," she said. "We'll stand with you publicly," offered Dr. Amara Wilson, president of the local Urban League chapter. "Your story resonates because you had the power to fight back. Most don't." By morning, press releases from 5 civil rights organizations hit newsrooms across America. Social media exploded with "Duo Stand with Zara" hashtags. What had been a viral moment of outrage transformed into something more substantial, a rallying cry for systemic change in the hospitality industry. When Zara walked through the lobby the next day, she noticed the subtle division among staff, those who nodded respectfully and those who averted their eyes. The tension was palpable, like electricity before a storm. "The Nashville Equality Coalition is holding a press conference outside at noon," Michael Johnson informed her, his expression conflicted, but his voice steady. "Security is concerned about crowds." "Let them come," Zara replied, straightening her jacket. "This hotel has been exclusive for too long. It's time we truly lived up to the meaning of hospitality." By sunset, news vans lined the street outside. The Grand Meridian wasn't just a luxury hotel anymore. It had become a symbol in America's ongoing conversation about race and belonging, a battleground where the future of an entire industry hung in the balance. By the end of the week, social media had transformed the Grand Meridian Hotel from a luxury establishment into a cultural battleground. Bloggers and influencers descended on Nashville like modern-day gold rushers, each hoping to mine content from the unfolding drama of Zara Washington's revolution. Among them was Linda Chen, a tech-savvy content creator whose livestream quickly became the definitive chronicle of the hotel's transformation. "I'm standing in what might be the most watched lobby in America right now," she narrated to her rapidly growing audience. Her smartphone capturing the subtle tensions playing out between old and new staff members, Linda positioned herself strategically each day, documenting Anthony Rodriguez's awkward attempts to implement the new protocols and the whispered conversations between Margaret Carter and other nervous executives. Her followers doubled, then tripled as she captured authentic moments that larger media outlets missed. "You can feel two worlds colliding here," Linda explained during one popular broadcast. "Watch how some staff still flinch when guests who don't fit their old profile approach the front desk, but then see how others are embracing the change." The live streamer became such a fixture that even Zara acknowledged her presence, granting a brief interview where she articulated her vision with the calm determination that had become her trademark. "This isn't just about one incident," the CEO explained. "It's about reimagining what hospitality truly means." As Linda's documentary-style coverage gained traction, it created a feedback loop. Viewers from across the country began booking rooms specifically to experience the transformation firsthand. By the following week, the marble lobby that had once catered exclusively to a homogeneous clientele buzzed with diverse energy. A middle-aged couple from Detroit, who had previously been given poor service, now checked in without incident. A family speaking Spanish received recommendations from Michael Johnson himself. The security guard's earlier discomfort replaced with genuine attentiveness. A group of young black professionals held an impromptu business meeting in the lounge area where, just days earlier, they might have received suspicious glances. The atmosphere remained charged with uncertainty. Old Guard employees still exchanged glances when they thought no one was watching. Leonard Price was spotted in hushed conversation with Evelyn Turner near the elevators, both board members looking distinctly unhappy as they eyed the changing demographic of their clientele. Yet beneath the tension, something else was taking root. Linda captured it perfectly in her evening broadcast. What you're witnessing isn't just damage control or corporate PR. There's something authentic happening here, something that feels like hope. The backlash hit social media like a storm. Anonymous accounts claiming to be former Grand Meridian managers flooded review sites and business forums with scathing posts about Zara Washington. Nothing but a political opportunist exploiting a moment for publicity. Read one particularly venomous comment that gained traction overnight. Another claimed she was destroying decades of tradition to appease the woke mob. These coordinated attacks triggered a fresh wave of negative press, with several conservative outlets questioning her leadership capabilities. Leonard Price quietly fueled the fire, connecting journalists with disgruntled former employees willing to speak against the new CEO. In hushed phone calls from his Nashville office, he assured them their identities would remain protected while they told the truth about what was happening to the hotel. But while the controversy raged online, the actual numbers painted a different picture. Margaret Carter, despite her initial skepticism, couldn't ignore the financial reports crossing her desk. Bookings had climbed 15% in just 3 weeks, with a noticeable increase in corporate clients specifically requesting the Grand Meridian for conferences. People are curious, she admitted during a tense board meeting, and curiosity translates to revenue. The hotel's review scores told an even more compelling story. New guests consistently praised the genuine welcome and refreshingly inclusive atmosphere. One viral review from a black business executive who had previously avoided Nashville hotels described his stay as revolutionary in its normalcy, simply being treated with the same courtesy as everyone else. Even within the hotel, subtle shifts were occurring. Anthony Rodriguez noticed housekeeping staff laughing more freely in the break room. The front desk team, initially divided over the changes, now worked with renewed purpose. Michael Johnson, once the reluctant security guard, had started organizing informal gatherings after shifts where employees could voice concerns directly. "I never thought I'd say this," confessed a veteran concierge to Zara during a routine floor walk. "But morale hasn't been this good in years. People actually want to come to work." Linda Chen captured these transformations in her increasingly popular live streams, contrasting the angry online rhetoric with footage of the bustling, diverse lobby. Her audience doubled as she documented both the resistance and the quiet victories happening inside the Grand Meridian's walls. Evelyn Turner watched these developments with growing unease. The narrative was slipping from their control. What had begun as a scandal was transforming into something far more dangerous to the old guard, a success story. The Grand Meridian's lobby had transformed in subtle ways since Zara Washington had taken over. The marble floors still gleamed, but somehow the space felt warmer, more inviting. Perhaps it was the fresh flowers on the reception desk, or the soft jazz playing in the background, or perhaps it was the changing atmosphere among the staff. Michael Johnson had been contemplating this moment for days. The security guard had replayed the incident in his mind countless times, how he'd escorted Zara out, following Carol Coleman's orders without question. He spotted her near the concierge desk, speaking with a guest, her posture relaxed yet professional. When she finished, Michael approached, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Ms. Washington, do you have a moment?" Zara turned, her expression neutral as she recognized him. "Of course, Michael." They moved to a quiet corner of the lobby. The security guard shifted his weight from one foot to another, struggling to find the right words. The memory of that day, smartphones recording, the humiliation in her eyes, weighed heavily on him. "I've been wanting to talk to you," he began, his voice lower than intended, "about what happened that day." She waited patiently, giving him space to continue. "I followed orders without thinking, without questioning." Michael's voice trembled slightly. "I've never considered myself prejudiced, but actions speak louder than words, don't they? I should have asked questions. I should have shown basic respect." The evening light filtered through the grand windows, casting long shadows across the floor. A few guests walked by, oblivious to the weight of the conversation. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. But I want you to know I'm committed to doing better. The training sessions have opened my eyes to things I never noticed before." Michael looked directly at her. "I want to earn a second chance, to prove I'm more than that moment." Zara studied him carefully. She'd seen many apologies since taking over, some sincere, others merely performative. The difference was always in the eyes, in the willingness to acknowledge discomfort rather than avoid it. "That's all I ask," she said finally, her voice firm but not unkind. "Growth is the standard now." She extended her hand, and Michael shook it, relief washing over his features. "Anthony Rodriguez mentioned you've been helping new staff understand the protocols," she added. Michael nodded. "It feels right to use what I've learned." As they parted ways, Zara watched him return to his post. Transformation wasn't just about policy changes or training sessions. It happened in quiet moments like this, one conversation, one realization at a time. The hotel was changing, person by person, and perhaps that was the most important renovation of all. The pressure mounted like a storm cloud over the Grand Meridian Hotel. 3 weeks into Zara Washington's leadership, investors were growing restless as reports came in from sister properties across the chain. Traditional clientele, the old money that had sustained the hotels for decades, were cancelling reservations, citing changes in management philosophy. Margaret Carter cornered Zara in the executive lounge, spreadsheets displayed on her tablet. "The numbers don't lie," she said, her voice low but urgent. "We're losing the Richardson account in Atlanta, and the Westfield conference in Chicago just pulled out." The board member tapped the screen, highlighting the declining figures. "Perhaps we could implement these changes more gradually." Zara studied Margaret's face, noting the genuine concern beneath the calculation. "I understand the risk," she replied, setting down her coffee cup. "But half measures won't work here. We either transform completely or we don't transform at all." That evening, rather than retreating, Zara called an emergency meeting with her communications team. "Invite every journalist in Nashville," she instructed. "Local and national, I don't care. Tell them we're opening our doors completely." The press arrived 2 days later, notebooks and cameras ready. Instead of a standard press conference in the ballroom, they found Zara waiting in the lobby, dressed impeccably but without pretension. "Welcome to the new Grand Meridian," she announced. "Today you'll see everything. No rehearsed tours, no restricted areas." Journalists followed as the CEO personally walked the property, greeting housekeepers by name and stopping to help a bellhop with a particularly heavy suitcase. When Linda Chen began live-streaming the tour, viewership numbers climbed into the thousands. "This isn't a publicity stunt," Zara explained to a skeptical reporter from the Nashville Business Journal. "This is who we are now." She paused at the front desk, where Anthony Rodriguez was checking in, an elderly couple. The security guard turned receptionist handled the interaction with genuine warmth that would have been unimaginable a month earlier. That night, after the press had gone, Margaret approached Zara again. "Bold move," she admitted. "But will it be enough?" Zara smiled, showing the first hint of fatigue. "It has to be, because we're not going back." She nodded toward the lobby, where Michael Johnson was patiently giving directions to a group of young tourists who, weeks ago, might have been viewed with suspicion. "Look at that. That's not policy on paper. That's real change." By morning, Linda's live stream had been viewed over 100,000 times. Bookings for the weekend suddenly spiked. The revolution, it seemed, would be televised after all. The emergency board meeting had been called with barely an hour's notice. Zara Washington entered the boardroom to find Margaret Carter already seated, her face tense as she clutched a tablet displaying an email from the National Business Leadership Conference. "They've cancelled," Margaret announced, her voice clipped. 400 executives gone. They're citing uncertainty about the hotel's new direction as their reason. She placed the device on the polished table, where the projected revenue loss glared in red numbers. The room fell silent as other board members filed in. Whispers travelled around the table, some suggesting that Zara's reforms had finally crossed the line from bold to reckless. Leonard Price didn't bother to hide his satisfaction, leaning toward Evelyn Turner with a smirk that said everything without words. "This conference has been our Q3 anchor for 5 years," Margaret continued. "Without it, we're looking at a 20% revenue shortfall for the quarter." Zara maintained her composure, though her mind raced through contingency plans. "Have they booked elsewhere?" "Not yet," Margaret replied, "but the Westbrook and Chandler hotels are both courting them aggressively. Leonard cleared his throat. Perhaps this is the wake-up call we needed. Your social experiment is costing us our core business, Zara. She met his gaze steadily. This isn't an experiment, Leonard. It's a long-term investment in our future. The CEO spent the next hour fielding concerns. Some legitimate, others thinly veiled attacks. Through it all, she refused to backpedal on her vision for the Grand Meridian. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. The original video of Zara being escorted from her own hotel began trending again, this time with commentary from business leaders praising her courage. The hashtag #BeStandWithGrandMeridian gained traction hourly. By afternoon, Zara's assistant rushed into her office with news. The conference organizers were calling. On speakerphone, their executive director expressed a change of heart. "We've been watching what you're building there," the woman explained. "Our members have made it clear they want to support businesses that align with values of inclusion. We'd like to not only reinstate our booking, but feature your transformation as our opening keynote." When Zara shared the news with the board, even Margaret couldn't hide her surprise. The financial projections shifted from red to black in an instant. Anthony Rodriguez, who had been invited to present the security team's progress, nodded in quiet validation. "The tide is turning," Zara said simply, closing her folder as Leonard and Evelyn exchanged worried glances across the table. "And we're going to ride it all the way in." In the months that followed, the Grand Meridian became a lightning rod for debate across the nation. Conservative talk show hosts lambasted the hotel's new policies as woke capitalism gone wild, while liberal commentators praised Zara Washington's bold leadership. Nashville found itself at the center of a cultural conversation that extended far beyond hospitality. "What's happening at the Grand Meridian isn't just about one hotel," a prominent news anchor declared. "It's about whether businesses can be vehicles for social change." Meanwhile, celebrities and social media influencers flocked to Nashville, booking suites at the Grand Meridian, not just for accommodation, but as a statement. Photographs of stars in the transformed lobby flooded social platforms, each post tagging the hotel and its revolutionary CEO. Room bookings surged, with many guests explicitly mentioning they chose the establishment because of its new inclusive policies. Zara observed this phenomenon with measured satisfaction. She hadn't anticipated becoming the face of a movement, but she embraced the responsibility with characteristic poise. During a staff meeting, she reminded everyone, "Our success isn't measured by headlines or famous guests. It's measured by how we treat every single person who walks through those doors." Other hotels in the industry watched with a mixture of nervousness and fascination. Some executives privately dismissed the Grand Meridian's approach as a temporary publicity stunt, while others sent undercover staff to observe the changes firsthand. When quarterly profits showed a 23% increase, however, the dismissive murmurs quieted. Emboldened by each success, Zara began implementing her Hospitality First protocol across all properties in the chain. The training program, now refined and proven effective, became mandatory at every location. "We're creating a new standard," she told Margaret during a tense board meeting. The board member still harbored concerns about alienating traditional clientele, but couldn't argue with the financial results. Not everyone celebrated these victories. In the wood-paneled bar of an exclusive country club across town, Leonard Price and Evelyn Turner met regularly to strategize. Their resentment deepened with each positive headline about the hotel. "She's turning everything upside down," Evelyn complained, swirling her drink. "Decades of tradition thrown out for what? Some viral moment?" Leonard nodded grimly. "The board is too dazzled by the numbers to see the long-term damage she's doing to our brand identity." What neither realized was that their definition of brand identity was precisely what Zara was determined to change, not just at the Grand Meridian, but throughout an industry that had for too long confused exclusivity with excellence. Evelyn Turner slid into the corner booth of a dimly lit restaurant 3 blocks from the Grand Meridian Hotel. She checked her watch impatiently before a man with a notebook approached. "I appreciate your willingness to speak with me, Miss Turner," the journalist said, setting a recording device between them. "You mentioned having concerns about the hotel's direction. Let's just say Zara Washington's so-called revolution is built on quicksand," Evelyn replied, her voice hushed yet venomous. "Our traditional guests are fleeing. The board wasn't consulted on half these changes. She's running a social experiment with other people's investments." This wasn't Evelyn's first such meeting. Over the past weeks, she had cultivated relationships with several reporters, carefully planting seeds of doubt about the CEO's competence. Each story that emerged painted Zara as impulsive and inexperienced, a diversity hire more interested in headlines than hospitality. Meanwhile, across town, Linda Chen sat surrounded by monitors in her temporary apartment. The blogger's fingers flew across her keyboard as she edited footage from the Grand Meridian's transformation. "This isn't just a hotel story anymore," Linda explained to her live stream audience of thousands. "What's happening here is challenging an entire industry." Her documentary series, The Meridian Revolution, had become a social media phenomenon. When a particularly damaging article appeared claiming staff morale was collapsing, Linda simply released unedited interviews with employees describing their renewed sense of purpose. When financial doom was predicted, she countered with footage of the increasingly diverse clientele filling rooms. "The numbers don't lie," she told viewers, displaying occupancy rates that directly contradicted the narratives being pushed by Evelyn and her allies. On the hotel's ground floor, Anthony Rodriguez gathered a group of new hires in the staff room. The security guard's transformation had surprised everyone, including himself. 3 months ago, "I thought this was all PR nonsense," Anthony admitted to the circle of attentive faces. "I was wrong. I've worked here 7 years, and this is the first time I've felt proud of what we're building." He shared stories of guests who had previously been profiled or made uncomfortable but were now returning with their families. His voice grew passionate as he described the difference in how people carried themselves in a space where they felt valued. "It's not just policy," Anthony explained. "It's about dignity, about seeing people first." As the meeting ended, he noticed Michael Johnson nodding in agreement from across the room. The 2 men, once reluctant participants in Zara's vision, had become its most effective ambassadors among the staff. Outside, another news van pulled up to the hotel entrance, hunting for controversy but finding only transformation. 3 months into the transformation, the Grand Meridian Hotel had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis. The lobby that once gleamed with cold, impersonal marble now pulsed with warmth and character. Vibrant local artwork adorned walls that had previously displayed only corporate-approved pieces. The scent of fresh magnolias and seasonal blooms wafted through the air, replacing the sterile hotel fragrance that had become standard across the industry. Zara Washington had assembled a diverse committee of staff members to reimagine the space. Anthony Rodriguez, once skeptical of the changes, had become one of the most enthusiastic contributors, suggesting artwork from Nashville's emerging artists of color. The security guard's eye for detail surprised everyone, including himself. "We wanted guests to feel Nashville's soul the moment they walked in," Michael Johnson explained to a curious visitor. His transformation from reluctant participant to passionate advocate had been remarkable. Before, this place could have been any luxury hotel anywhere. Now it has an identity. Every morning, Zara made a point of walking the floor, greeting guests personally and engaging with staff. She moved through the space with the same calm poise she'd shown that first day, but now her presence inspired admiration rather than confrontation. "I never thought I'd stay here," an elderly black woman confided to the CEO during one of these walks. "My daughter booked it as a surprise. In my day, places like this weren't for people like me." She gestured around the transformed lobby. "This feels different. It feels possible." These conversations sustained Zara through the difficult days. Margaret Carter still questioned every expense related to the renovation, her calculator never far from reach. "The board expects returns, not just good feelings," she'd remind Zara during their weekly meetings, yet even Margaret couldn't deny the shift in atmosphere. Occupancy rates were climbing steadily, and guests lingered longer in public spaces, ordering more from the bar and restaurant. The hotel staff moved with new purpose. Employees who had once kept their heads down now made eye contact with guests, initiated conversations, shared recommendations about local attractions with genuine enthusiasm. The flowers alone cost $4,000 monthly, Margaret pointed out during a budget review. Zara nodded, unperturbed. "And how much does it cost when guests feel unwelcome? When they tell others not to come? When our staff feels disconnected from their workplace?" She smiled. "Some investments don't show up on spreadsheets, Margaret," as she watched a young family checking in, their faces lighting up at the welcome they received. Zara knew with absolute certainty that the risk had been worth it. The Grand Meridian wasn't just changing its appearance, it was changing its soul. Leonard Price wasn't a man who accepted defeat gracefully. 5 months into Zara Washington's tenure as CEO, he orchestrated what he believed would be her downfall. In hushed phone calls from his downtown office, the board member leaked fabricated financial forecasts to 3 major business publications, painting a grim picture of the Grand Meridian's future. Sources close to the board indicate catastrophic revenue drops, read one headline. Another claimed, "Nashville's luxury hotel experiment headed for bankruptcy by year's end." The stock took an immediate hit, dropping 8% in a single afternoon. Zara remained unshaken. She'd anticipated this move. While Price had been plotting, she'd been building. The CEO called an emergency press conference in the hotel's newly redesigned lobby, where she calmly displayed the actual quarterly figures. "Transparency is part of our new culture," she stated, standing beneath a striking piece of local artwork. "Our occupancy rate has increased 27%. Revenue is up 32% compared to last year." Margaret Carter watched from the sidelines, her calculator app open as she verified the numbers herself. The board member had been skeptical of Zara's reforms, but couldn't argue with the financial results. When reporters asked for her comment, Margaret simply nodded. The numbers speak for themselves. What Leonard hadn't counted on was the public's response to his attempted sabotage. Bookings surged as supporters deliberately chose the Grand Meridian to show solidarity. Corporate clients, initially hesitant about the hotel's transformation, now requested blocks of rooms for conferences months in advance. "We've had to create a waiting list for the East Wing suites," Anthony Rodriguez told Linda Chen during one of her regular live streams. The security guard, now promoted to guest relations manager, smiled with genuine pride. "People specifically ask for the rooms featured in your videos." Even Michael Johnson found himself fielding calls from investors. "They want to know if we can replicate this model in other cities," he explained to Zara during their weekly check-in. "They're talking about expansion, not damage control." By month's end, Leonard Price's plan had backfired spectacularly. 3 investment groups requested meetings with Zara, each eager to fund similar transformations across their own hotel portfolios. The share price not only recovered, but reached a 5-year high. In a final blow to his credibility, an anonymous source leaked Price's original emails, plotting the financial scare. Though Zara never confirmed who exposed him, the timing coincided with Evelyn Turner's sudden interest in distancing herself from her former ally. As Zara reviewed the latest booking figures in her office, she allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The path forward was clearer than ever, not just for the Grand Meridian, but for an entire industry ready for change. Word of the Grand Meridian's transformation spread beyond Nashville's city limits, catching the attention of Tennessee's state legislature. Representative Olivia Daniels, inspired by the hotel's remarkable turnaround, introduced Bill 478, legislation that would hold hospitality establishments legally accountable for discriminatory practices against guests or employees. What happened at the Grand Meridian exposed a gap in our laws, Daniels announced at a press conference. So no one should experience what Miss Washington endured in her own establishment. The bill quickly became controversial. Industry lobbyists argued it would create excessive regulatory burdens, while civil rights advocates praised it as long overdue. When the Legislative Committee scheduled public hearings, Zara Washington received an official invitation to testify. On a crisp morning, the CEO entered the state capitol building, flanked by Anthony Rodriguez and Margaret Carter, an unlikely alliance that symbolized the hotel's evolution. The boardroom member had gradually shifted from skepticism to cautious support as the financial reports continued to improve month after month. The hearing room buzzed with tension. Hotel association representatives filled the front rows, their expressions tense. Linda Chen positioned herself strategically, her live stream already attracting thousands of viewers nationwide. When Zara took the stand, her composure was striking. She wore a tailored navy suit, her voice steady as she recounted that humiliating day in the lobby. Rather than focusing solely on her experience, she presented data, incidents reported across the state, guest testimonials, and the Grand Meridian's financial turnaround since implementing inclusive policies. "The numbers speak for themselves," she explained, gesturing toward the charts projected behind her. "Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business." A skeptical senator interrupted. "Ms. Washington, aren't you simply capitalizing on an unfortunate misunderstanding for publicity?" The room fell silent. Zara paused, then leaned toward the microphone. "This isn't just about business," she said, her words measured and clear. "It's about what kind of society we want to be." The Grand Meridian's story demonstrates that accountability and inclusion aren't just ethical imperatives, they're economic opportunities. Her testimony lasted 45 minutes, but those 15 words resonated throughout the chamber. Even former critics nodded thoughtfully. Outside, protesters and supporters alike listened to live streams, sharing clips that would circulate for days. As Zara left the Capitol, Anthony squeezed her shoulder. "You just changed more than a hotel today," he said quietly. The bill would face amendments and challenges in the coming weeks, but something fundamental had shifted. What began as one woman's humiliation was evolving into legislative action that could protect countless others. 5 months into Zara Washington's leadership, the Grand Meridian Hotel had transformed beyond recognition. The once cold, exclusive establishment now buzzed with diverse energy and genuine warmth. Business journals across the country featured the hotel as a case study in successful cultural transformation, with Harvard Business Review dedicating an entire issue to what they called the Nashville Revolution. Staff members who had once whispered in corners, plotting against their new CEO, now proudly recounted their roles in the hotel's metamorphosis. "I was skeptical at first," admitted Janice from housekeeping, who had initially signed a petition against the changes. But Ms. Washington listened to our concerns instead of dismissing them," Now I tell everyone I was part of something historic. The lobby, once a monument to old money exclusivity, now featured rotating art exhibitions from local artists of all backgrounds. Guests commented on the palpable difference in atmosphere, how the marble floors somehow felt warmer, the air lighter, the smiles more genuine. Anthony Rodriguez had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation. The security guard, who had reluctantly agreed to Zara's reforms, now led the hotel's Hospitality Without Borders training program. "What happened that day changed me," he told new recruits. "I realized I'd been trained to see threats where there were only people." Working alongside him, Michael Johnson had become equally passionate about reform. The two men, once instruments of exclusion, now mentored new hires from neighborhoods and backgrounds the Grand Meridian had previously overlooked. Their training sessions became so renowned that other hotels in Nashville began sending their staff to learn. "We don't just teach protocols," Michael explained during one session. "We teach people to question their assumptions." His journey from the man who had escorted Zara out to becoming one of her most vocal supporters symbolized everything the CEO had hoped to achieve. Zara herself remained hands-on, walking the hotel floors daily and greeting guests by name. She made a point of connecting with every department, from maintenance to management. "The transformation isn't just about policies," she told a journalist from the Wall Street Journal. "It's about creating a space where everyone feels they belong." The hotel's occupancy rates had climbed to 97%, unprecedented in Nashville's hospitality industry. What had begun as a humiliating moment captured on smartphones had evolved into a movement that was changing not just one hotel, but an entire industry's approach to inclusion and belonging. The quarterly financial meeting at the Grand Meridian Hotel had never felt so electric. Zara Washington stood at the head of the mahogany table, presenting figures that left even the most skeptical board members speechless. Revenue had increased by 37% compared to the same quarter last year, while customer satisfaction scores had reached unprecedented heights. "These aren't just good numbers," Zara explained, gesturing toward the projection screen. "They represent a fundamental shift in our business model." The CEO's calm demeanor belied the triumph she felt inside. 6 months of relentless work, criticism, and determination had transformed not just the hotel's culture, but its bottom line. Margaret Carter, who had initially questioned whether the reforms would alienate traditional guests, now leaned forward with undisguised interest. "I've never seen margins like these in my 20 years on this board," she admitted, tapping her pen against her notepad. "The new demographics we're reaching, they're spending more per stay than our previous clientele." The data was undeniable. Bookings from international travelers had doubled. Corporate clients who valued inclusion were specifically requesting the Grand Meridian for conferences. Even wedding reservations had surged as couples sought venues that aligned with their values. In the corner, Leonard Price sat stone-faced, his usual financial objections silenced by the irrefutable success. Next to him, Evelyn Turner scrolled through her phone, barely participating. The two board members who had once wielded significant influence now found themselves isolated, their predictions of disaster thoroughly debunked. After the meeting, Zara received a hand-delivered envelope. Inside was a terse resignation letter from Leonard, citing personal reasons for his departure. By evening, a similar letter arrived from Evelyn. Neither had the courage to face the woman they'd tried to undermine for months. "And they couldn't stand being wrong," Margaret remarked later, as she and Zara shared coffee in the newly renovated executive lounge. The board member had become an unexpected ally, her business acumen eventually aligning with Zara's vision. The hospitality industry has operated on outdated assumptions for decades. You proved them wrong in the most effective way possible, with profit. That night, Zara walked through the bustling lobby, observing guests from all walks of life, enjoying the space that had once been so coldly exclusive. Anthony Rodriguez nodded respectfully as she passed his security station, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. The numbers told a story beyond mere financial success. They validated a truth Zara had known all along. Inclusion wasn't just morally right, it was good business. As the last holdouts of resistance resigned from the board, the path forward became clearer than ever. The American Hospitality Association's annual conference buzzed with anticipation as Zara Washington took the stage. 6 months earlier, she had been escorted from her own hotel. Now, she stood before industry leaders, accepting the Model of the Year award for the Grand Meridian. The audience rose in a standing ovation, many of the same executives who had initially predicted her downfall. "This recognition isn't just for me," Zara said, her voice steady and clear. "Ooh, it's for every staff member who embraced change, especially Anthony Rodriguez and Michael Johnson, who transformed our security protocols from the ground up." Cameras flashed as she held the crystal trophy, a symbol of how far they'd come. The Grand Meridian's occupancy rates had increased by 30%, with profits exceeding projections by millions. What began as a viral humiliation had become a masterclass in crisis management and inclusive leadership. Harvard Business School was the first to call, followed by Cornell and Vanderbilt. The CEO found herself guest lecturing twice a month, her calendar filled with speaking engagements where she shared the Grand Meridian's transformation blueprint. Students sat rapt as she detailed the resistance she'd faced from board members like Leonard Price and Evelyn Turner, and how their resignations ultimately strengthened the organization. "The numbers tell the story," she would explain, displaying charts that tracked the hotel's meteoric rise. "But the real metric is the change in our culture." Perhaps most surprising was the fate of the original viral video. The footage that had once threatened to destroy the Grand Meridian now appeared in training programs nationwide. Hotel chains across America incorporated it into their onboarding materials, using Zara's experience to illustrate how quickly reputation could be lost or rebuilt. Margaret Carter, unskeptical of the reforms, now proudly presented these materials to new hires. "This moment changed everything," she would say, pausing the video at the exact second Zara revealed her executive badge. "It taught us that hospitality isn't just a service, it's a value." Even Linda Chen's documentary had found its audience, streaming on major platforms and winning a regional Emmy for social impact journalism. Her cameras continued to follow the Grand Meridian's journey, capturing the subtle ways the hotel had become more welcoming, from the diverse artwork in the lobby to the inclusive language in all customer communications. The Nashville State Legislature passed what locals called the Meridian Act, establishing new anti-discrimination standards for the hospitality industry statewide. As Zara testified at hearings across the country, the ripple effects of that fateful day continued to spread, transforming not just one hotel, but an entire industry's understanding of what true hospitality meant. 6 months to the day after being escorted from her own hotel, Zara Washington stood in the transformed lobby of the Grand Meridian, taking in the remarkable changes. The once cold marble floors now gleamed with a welcoming warmth, enhanced by the soft lighting from redesigned fixtures. Music, a carefully curated playlist reflecting Nashville's diverse musical heritage, filled the air, creating an atmosphere that felt both elegant and approachable. Around her, staff members from every background mingled with guests, their interactions natural and genuine. Anthony Rodriguez, now the head of security training, was explaining the hotel's community outreach program to a group of industry representatives. His journey from reluctant participant to passionate advocate symbolized everything the transformation stood for. Michael Johnson approached with a tray of champagne flutes. "For the woman who gave second chances," he said, his eyes reflecting sincere gratitude. The security guard had become one of her most loyal team members, often sharing his story with new hires about how accountability had changed his perspective. Margaret Carter, who had once questioned whether the reforms would destroy profits, now proudly showcased the quarterly reports to potential investors. "The numbers speak for themselves," the board member admitted, having finally embraced that inclusion and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Journalists circulated through the celebration, including Linda Chen, whose live streams had countered every negative narrative during the difficult early days. The blogger captured footage of guests from demographics that would have been unwelcome just 6 months earlier. Now enjoying the luxury that had previously been reserved for a select few, a local legislator approached Zara, mentioning how the Hospitality Accountability Act was gaining support across multiple states. "Your stand here is changing policy nationwide," she explained, shaking the CEO's hand. Zara's phone buzzed with a notification. The American Hospitality Association had just announced the Grand Meridian as the recipient of their highest honor for industry transformation. She smiled, remembering the day she'd walked into this lobby and been treated as an intruder. Now, the very video that had captured her humiliation was being used in training programs across the country. As the celebration continued around her, Zara gazed at the diverse faces filling the space, staff who had found dignity in their work, guests who felt truly welcome, and even former skeptics who'd come to recognize the value of change. She smiled. Not just for the cameras documenting this milestone, but for the future she'd helped create, a future where no one would ever be thrown out of a place they belonged.